And I'll start letting people in.
All right. Whee! Gonna try to control my ums tonight.
All right. All right, everybody, I'm letting people in. To remind everybody, we have the chat, and in the chat is where you can ask your questions. So we had more than 30 people sign up, and we have so far 13. And for some reason, David's taking a while to come in. I don't know. All right. We're at 7 o'clock, so everyone go to your windows and clap. Apparently in LA, the ship left today, and they had a flyby of the naval, the guys who were here like a week or two ago are down. They made it to LA.
Am I supposed to have all these people on the side here?
Oh, if you want them to, that's your own choice. They're not showing up for me. It's just you.
There I am.
Actually, I can do that also. I can put it into gallery view, but I like to just capture you.
I'll just leave you up just in case
Yep.
in case you want to wave at me or something.
So we'll just give it a minute or two, Grace. And I don't know what's wrong with David Gendris is stuck getting in.
Tell him to start over.
Yeah.
Usually the best way. There's a whole bunch of people here, but not.
Oh, there's more coming.
Yeah.
So. All right. Oh, we got more, so let's just give it another minute. All right. Got 17 people here. Well, welcome everybody to our Friday night at the movies. Tonight, continuing this kind of flow of people who are sharing their experiences doing interesting bike rides. We have Jacqueline Gikow, who did the stretching class, and I know her going back a ways. The first time she overwhelmed me with my impressiveness of her was when she told me she was going to do Iowa RAGBRAI, and then of course the next year she told me she's doing Carolina, what is it, mountains to ocean, right?
Mountains to coast. Only
to coast.
People that didn't grow up in the United States call it ocean.
Sorry. Well, that's me. Yes, Canadian. So without further ado, just to remind everybody, and we have a few more people coming in, just to remind everybody that I will monitor the chat for your questions, and we will make this as interactive as you want it to be. But without further ado, there's some great pictures and some great stories. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Jacqueline. Thank you.
Hi. Okay. So, yeah. RAGBRAI. RAGBRAI, I first heard of RAGBRAI in 2016. I was on a training ride with We Bike New York, the women's bike group. We were going up the river to Little Red, and a couple of women came and they had the jerseys from RAGBRAI. So we all said, "What's that?" And they talked about what they had done with this amazing bike ride across Iowa. And I thought that sounded like a lot of fun. So I went home and I looked it up, and I bookmarked the link, and I thought I would do it the next year. But the next year, I remembered in July, so I missed it. And so I decided that I was just going to do it the following year, and I posted in the women's group that I was doing it. Did anybody else want to do it? And nobody could the next year, so I signed up. You sign up in January. And and one person actually had done it already. She gave me a whole bunch of information about what I needed and the cost. Beyond the RAGBRAI costs $160 to register for RAGBRAI, which sounds really reasonable, except it doesn't take into account the fact that you have to camp for a week, and you have to eat, and you have to get there, and you have to get your bike there, and And quite frankly, coming from New York, you could go to California twice for the amount that it costs to get to Iowa. So I just kind of did it. She said, just do it one plunking amount down at a time, and you won't even notice it. It won't be painful, which she was lying about. But at any rate, that's what I did, $400 here and $300 there. And it just kind of added up, and there were camping stuff that I didn't know about. Anyway, so RAGBRAI is a ride that I think it's been around over 25 years. Mine was the 25th year or 18th year. I think it's been around for a while before that, and some people go every year. They accept you sign up in January, but you don't find out that you're going to go until May, because they get like a ton of people signing up and not everybody can go. They cap it for the entire week at 8,000 people, and 2,000 people they accept for partial, like a day or 2 days or that sort of thing. What they don't tell you is that there's another 5,000 people that show up and they're not registered. So you can see from this picture, it looks like a big group. It's a zoo. So this is the picture that they used as their promo that year. This was one of the ads that they had once they published the route and how many miles it was, they let you know. This was supposedly one of the shorter and flatter routes that they had, which was hilly and long enough for me. This was the year. This was the motif from the jersey, and this was the basic route that they published. And this is where you went. So what you ended up doing was most people flew into Davenport on the west, took a bus across town to Ottawa, and then started riding back, and you ended up back in Davenport. So I had to buy a tent. I had to buy a sleeping bag, and you name it. Didn't know anything about tents since I was in high school, and so I picked up a pup tent. Don't do that. You can't sit up in it even, but it was a good tent. It was waterproof. It's an old company, and I was comfortable sleeping in it. I took 2 pairs of sunglasses, promptly lost one on the bus on the way there. And this is the jersey that they use, that logo that I mentioned before. You got this little band that made everybody, made them know that if you had to get the SAG truck or you had to get into a food court, that you were actually officially registered. And this was my tent. So I went over to the George Washington Bridge area and set it up one day so that I would know what to do. I hadn't set up a tent, I think.
One of the questions you have is, was there a service called Comfy Campers, which is an outfit that sets up the tents for you, or that didn't exist out there?
I don't recall Comfy Campers in particular, although I know it in relationship. I know they are in the Erie Canal, cycle across the Erie Canal, but there are, I signed up with what they call a charter. Maybe Comfy Campers is probably another charter. So there are like some huge charters like that, and I signed up with a kind of a medium-sized charter called Branson, I think the name was, and because I belong to a couple of huge international Facebook groups for biking, and when I when I registered for RAGBRAI, I started posting questions. You know, what's the best way to stay? You can camp for free. They have a public camping site for RAGBRAI, but it's a little more comfortable if you work with a charter. And so I went to somebody recommended this medium-sized one over one that was like a little huger, where they actually set your tent up. And I didn't, but I also talked to a number of people at that point that didn't have a great experience with them. So I called the guy at Branson, and I said, you know, and I had a nice talk with him, and I had a good feeling for him. And it was a really nice company. They had some evening things, some concerts, and they had some dinners, not every night, but and they had breakfast every morning, or coffee and a muffin. Most people ended up going about an hour out to, you know, some of the vendors started setting up on the side of the road. So you know, you could, or you'd pass through a town and have breakfast. But, you know, coffee and the muffin in the morning was kind of nice. And I put this little kid's license plate on the back so that I could, you know, so people would know my name. The VIP is because of a group called I Love My Road Bike VIP. And so I put that on so people from that group, because there were a number of them going, would know who I was. And this was packing the day I was getting ready. And this was one of the, we stayed in a number of places that had on-site dining. This was one of them, and you just kind of went in and you know, and sat anywhere. So I, you know, met people as I was riding and setting up. This actually, I meant to take this out. This doesn't belong there. This is the on the way there. Obviously, I have a fascination with taking pictures outside the outside the airplane. So coming into Davenport, this was the first night. We set up our tents on the river in Davenport before, because the next day we were going to be trekking over to the other side of town, and it was really kind of nice. It's my little tent. It was pretty. It was pretty too. So next morning we got ready. We were waiting for the bus to come. Everybody, actually we were waiting for a whole bunch of buses to come, not one. The one thing I immediately missed when we got there was all the milk was fake. I didn't have real milk in my coffee for a week. I was really unhappy about that.
Another question, did they carry your luggage and camping equipment from location to location for you?
Yeah, that's the other reason that you would sign up with a charter, is that, you know, because if you go and use the public camping, you have to do your own, you have to trek your own stuff, or have somebody following you along. So if you know, with the charter, you bring your bags in the morning, and they dump them in a big thing at the end, when they set up at the next camp. And when you come in, you just go pick up your bags.
I think you might be fixing to say this, but how did you get your bike there? I thought you had a picture of your bike in a bike case. No?
Well, I took this trip. I had Toga. I bought the bike at Toga, so I brought it over to Toga. I used can't remember the name of the company I used. I wasn't happy with them. They screwed up my bike when they put it back together. But anyway, but Toga packed it up in a cardboard box. FedEx picked it up and took it there, and then they put it together. And then I picked it up when I got there. And at the end, you brought it to the same company, and they packed it up and shipped it back to Toga, and Toga put it back together. So, you know, it was pretty much all taken care of.
So on the arrival side, you're saying they didn't do the greatest job, but you had mechanics there. They have
Well,
mechanics.
they had mechanics there, didn't know what they were doing. I ended up with my bike seat too low for the entire time. Something had been screwed up when they took it apart, either to pack it or when they put it together, and some ball bearing got stuck, and so they couldn't move it. I didn't.
That raises an interesting question. So you're riding along, you realize it's too high. Are there mechanics along the way to help you at all, or not really? Like, do they have a
Well,
sack?
there are, but I was a novice at that point, and I didn't realize. It felt like it was wrong. I definitely felt like it was low, but I had other problems. I had a pinched nerve that I had developed that year, sometime in the winter, and so I was already in pain. So I wasn't focusing on the fact that the bike was part of my problem. I was just trying to get from day to day and have and get some sleep at night. So it was, there were extenuating circumstances that compounded any issues I might have had with the bike.
Okay,
So
when you arrived at your destination each night, did it take a long time to get your belongings and set up your tent, or was it sort
no,
of
the
really?
belongings were all there, and the tent was really fast. Took me about, tent took me about 15 minutes to put up. Less time as the week went by. This woman I met, she was somebody I knew from Facebook, and we met the first night, and then so the first morning we had breakfast together. Yeah. This was one of the water stands. So there were tons of people, and everybody, and it was pretty hot. Although we were very fortunate, the weather was perfect. The weather was like 85, 90, and I had heard horror stories about Iowa in July being, people were talking about, over 100-degree days, and there is actually, it's Iowa, so there's no trees. It's all corn. So 100 degrees would have been, and another 100 miles, if it came to that, would have been pretty unbearable. But it was very nice. It was sunny. We had 2 nights of rain. We had, but very short. One night it poured right after we set up. And I happened to set up in a hole, so all my stuff got soaked. But by the next morning, or by the next day, when we got to the next place, everything was dry because there was no humidity. And then there was one night that there was a thunderstorm, and for about an hour and a half, a whole bunch of us went and sat in one of the trucks. But other than that, the weather was like this. It was just lovely. This is another guy from one of the Facebook groups. And then there was a lot of this. I had my GoPro with me, and I didn't, at that time, I didn't know how to start and stop it. And so I have hours of people's butts as as I was riding, and I had to edit a lot. So this was the first day, which wasn't very long. We got in midday. It was kind of a nice start ride. We
Is
said,
breakfast included in the fee for the event?
nope, nope. There was like I said, the charter had like a little breakfast when you got up, coffee and some muffins and stuff like that. But
So,
there was one well-known vendor that set up about an hour outside of every town called Farm. It was called Farm Kids. It had originally been called Farm Boys, and then the Farm Boys got older and had kids and retired, and their kids took over. And it wasn't just boys, so it became Farm Boys. They had the best breakfasts. And then sometimes an hour out or so would be a town that you could have breakfast at.
great. And there's, the event fee I think you mentioned was about 160, but was there an upcharge for the luggage transport day to day, or that was included?
That was included with your fee to the charter.
Now, the only thing I'll just ask everyone, if you're not putting a question mark at the end, I'm going to assume you're just making a little comment for everyone else. If you expect me to ask, please be clear in asking your questions. Debbie's saying there used to be a vendor that made excellent breakfast burritos. Maybe that's the one you were talking about?
Farm Kids, yeah. Farm Kids, yeah.
Well, she also
had
let
all
us
kinds
know.
of stuff. This was the first day. Actually, this was the first day and the first rest stop, which was really amazing. I had to stop and take this video. So you can see this is going on for miles and miles in the background there.
How many people in total?
Probably around 15,000 people. Like I said, 10,000 were registered, and then that 5,000 could have been 2,000 one day, 3,000 one day, extra people that just decided they were going to ride with it. And some of them did the whole week, the ones that weren't registered. The only thing with people that weren't registered is if they had an accident, they were on their own. So, and if they didn't want to continue to ride, they couldn't call the SAG truck to bring them to the next town. So, that was, I don't know why people would do that, but, this is Iowa. It's kind of a different country. What the other thing is, this is a rest stop. You see people walking because with that many people and everybody was being accommodated by the stuff that was going on in the rest stop, the vendors and various stuff. When you got to a town, you literally just got off your bike, because there was no way, even if you didn't want to stop, there was no way that you were gonna go anywhere and in any speedy way. So this was my first day and the first time I saw all these people, and I was just overwhelmed. And then then it spreads out, and you never don't see anybody because with that many people. So this was one of the first towns, kind of didn't feel like you were in Midtown. So I came up on these 4 people that had come out to just watch the parade go by, and talked to them for a while. They were really, everybody was very friendly. It was, the RAGBRAI is the shot in the arm to, in terms of the economy, to Iowa every summer. And when you go into a town, they throw open the doors, and everybo's giving you, has things that are available. So this is kind of a composite, kind of the beginning of what happened through a couple of days, and it's sort of an interesting group of. the interesting thing was with all those people, I love this picture. uh, with all of these people and characters, the thing was really well organized. I mean, it was really obvious when you first started that there was going to be a lot of waiting in lines, but it wasn't overwhelming, and it was manageable. There were like tons of porta potties, so it wasn't like you had hours and hours of waiting to go to the bathroom. So
One of the questions you have is there a lot of traffic while riding? And the next question is, do you lock your bike up when you got to a town? And I remember asking you that when we looked at some of the pictures about when you slept at night. So two questions: how did you secure your bike, if and when, and car traffic while riding?
Actually, they recommended to people that that they didn't close the roads, but the day we were going through a town, or whatever the day we were going from one town to the next, everybody knows that, as opposed to the Five Borough Bike Club tour that has 35,000 people, and nobody seems to realize that we're taking over Central Park. in Iowa, they know that from on Monday we're going from this town to that town, and there's going to be 15,000 people on the road. So people that had to get someplace would ride, and you would kind of accommodate them. But for the most part, it was a day, and then the ride would move on, and the regular routine of everybody would resume. So we came into a town, and the Wi-Fi didn't work, because 15,000 people in a town with normally 5,000 people would throw everything off. The whole data setup was overwhelmed, and there were I noticed, actually, as we were going on, I think on a daily basis, if I saw 10 cars that were on the highway at the same time, it was a lot. And people just really didn't try to compete. The first night we were there, and I had to do an errand. I had to go to a little shopping center. People were very patient. The people in cars. I commented to somebody I was riding next to. I said, if I was in New York, people would be running me down, and they didn't. They just, they slowed down. They let the bikes move over to the side, or go around them and get where they were going. And then, like I said, the next day we were gone. We were in the next town, and it was kind of a repeat of that. So this guy was kind of a regular. He came every year, I understand. It was kind of cool. And then he had some cohorts with him, Batgirl and Batboy. I'm not exactly sure where this was breakfast. This was at one of the farm boys' place. And there was just some cool sculptures. Yeah, farm kids. I had the best breakfast here, although they still didn't have milk for the coffee. I just thought this was really kind of neat. So the trees unfortunately weren't near us. This is State College. We did a loop around the football field. And this was the night that we spent in Ames, so I thought that it was a full moon, which was really pretty. And then the next day, that was getting to Ames. That was the route, and this was not a lot of climbing on this one, even though, so it's, although I noticed after the first day that when you came into town, it was a climb. always, because it made sense, because as the people were populating the western states, they would want to be someplace safe. So that would mean they wanted to be as high as possible when they when they set up a town. These two girls, I ran into them every town along the way. They were also well known. They had done this a couple of, a number of times. Yeah. We had a chance to, I'm a city kid. Here we are. We were in a rural area, so I took advantage of any time I could to do something schmaltzy.
So you were taking it out for a spin, considering trading up your
Yeah,
turn for a tractor?
I have a couple of pictures of me on this track. Everybody took their turn taking it. It was like the Iowa sign. They took a picture on the tractor.
So apparently in the sidebar, it's been canceled for this year and they're issuing refunds, which is too bad.
Yeah, well,
but,
and also
someone told us that it had started in 1973, so maybe we can all make a plan to go on it in 2023, because by then, hopefully this virus will be long gone.
Yeah, well, what happened the next year, I went in 2018, and in 2019, there was some big brouhaha that went on at the end of it, and they split into two rides. Now there's RAGBRAI and the ride across Iowa, two different rides. The radio station that stopped it, there was some political thing. I wasn't paying attention because I wasn't there, but it was being chatted on Facebook, people were on one side or the other, and I don't know exactly what they're doing, but I don't think RAGBRAI even is being sponsored by the same people that were sponsoring it when I was there. Oh, you asked about locking up the bikes. Somebody asked about locking up the bikes. We didn't. We didn't. Actually, we just put them, if you noticed, let me go back here. This was a bunch of makeshift strings that they had, and you just hooked your bike on top. No, it wasn't. I don't remember. I did bring a lock because we always lock our bikes, but I didn't use it once.
Smart person with the bright yellow tape on their bike, easy to find in the crowd. By the way, our next mechanical session on Wednesday night will be retaping handlebars. So if you're interested, you can watch Chris do that.
I could use that.
There you go. Cool.
So Ames to Newton, another under 2,000 feet of climbing. So I was perfectly happy with the rides on this. They were in the 60 to after the first day, they were 60 to 80 miles. I didn't do the Century day. I didn't do the Century because it would have ended up being about 4,000 feet of climbing, and I cut myself off at 3,500, so I don't do that. So this one was a little
There's
higher.
a question if you know whether the two separate rides made different routes, or did they wind up doing the same route, both of them? And then did you train for this, and how did you train for this?
So no, I don't know anything about it because it was the next year and I was doing something else. I only know the fallout at the end of the summer. And how did I train for it? That's a great question. 2018, I in the New York Cycling Club, I did CSIG because it was 8 weeks of riding every week, and I thought that would be a good thing to do because at that time I wasn't riding in the winter, and so it started in March and it went through May. It's the end of March to the beginning of May. And then when that stopped, and also I was working with a personal trainer that year, he had been a racer, a bike racer, when he was younger, and so I asked him for some ideas on how I could train, and he suggested that I start doing hill repeats in Central Park. So I started going out on Wednesdays in between, sort of towards the end of CSIG and continuing until July. And I worked up from, I would do a loop around the park, and then at the top of Harlem Hill, or just after the top of Harlem Hill, you can go across 102nd Street back to, and go around again and do another hill repeat up Harlem Hill. So I started out and I barely made it up Harlem Hill. And I did one, and then the next time I went out I did two, and the next time I went out I would do three, and I built up to being able to do 10 hill repeats in the course of doing 3 laps around the park. So it was about, probably April, May, June, till I left. And then after the end of CSIG, or somewhere in May, yeah, I realized that I had to get up every morning for a week and ride. So it wasn't like I could say that next day, oh, I don't feel like it, because I couldn't get from Newton to Sigourney without riding. So I started signing up for cycling rides on Saturdays and Sunday. And if there wasn't a ride that I felt I would be able to do there, and there was one with Five Borough, I went on the Five Borough one. And so I was riding on Saturday and I was riding on Sunday. I was trying to do at least 100 miles a weekend, because 50 miles, and the next day. And then after doing that for a while, I started also, and then I was doing my hill repeats in the morning. In the middle of the week, on Wednesday morning, I would go out really early and do about anywhere between 15 and 25 miles in the park. So that's really how I trained for that. And also I was in the gym a lot. I was working with this trainer. I met with him once a week, and then I worked out at the Y couple of times. I belonged to the Y, so I had a routine where I would do the stuff that we did there, and I also at the same time was in physical therapy for a number of things, including not really including that pinched nerve, which I didn't know what was going on at that time, but I was doing a PT routine, and then doing a workout afterwards, because it's nice to ride a bike, but you're not really getting in shape by riding a bike only. So the first day or second day, the obligatory shadow shot. And this is what I always like. If you see in the distance there, that's a pretty long gradual hill, which doesn't it's not like you can't make it up, but by the top of it, you've done a hill. And at the top of the hill, there was usually a fruit stand with watermelon that people stopped at, which was kind of fun. But the nice thing about that hill was, on the other side there was always a downhill, which was a lot of fun. And I will say, this guy was fun. By the fourth day, I got up the fourth day in the morning, and I noticed that I was not having any problem on those rolling hills.
I guess
So
that
if you're
guy's, that
riding every
guy's,
day, if you're riding every day, you know, if you're riding every day, you're getting to be pretty good at riding every day.
I was going to make a joke about that picture two back. I guess that guy's nickname is Skin is Overrated.
It
Wow.
was really kind of amazing to see him, you know.
I don't know if Kent's on this. He's not on this, but Kent wears those kind of things.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
So this is another, you know, what the town looks like. Even in town, you can see there's not a lot of shade. I got actually, even though I was wearing stuff on my lips every day because somebody told me to do that, I got sunburned lips. It took a week when I got home to heal from that, because it's just sun and it's coming down on you, and there's nothing, you know, really no way that you can avoid getting burnt, even if you're using sunblock and everything else. But it's pretty, very pretty. This was this coming out of some area that it was a military cemetery. So after a while, I started taking my time and trying to get pictures of different kinds of animals. So this day, so the because the Wi-Fi and the data and everything else was so messed up, and there were so many people. This was a day where my my Garmin kept breaking, and I didn't know, and I didn't know what was going on until the end. When I got home, I was able to find the whole ride. It did it in little chunks here, so I put it together. This was Sigourney to Iowa City. And this guy rides every year. He made this bike by hand. It's really cool. This gives you an idea of the reality that you're not going to ride through the town that you get to. I mean, you can barely walk through the town. But once you leave the town, there's like all kinds of things going on. So this was an interesting little historic town museum that we passed by and took time to go through. And I managed to take a picture on their buggy.
Did you typically ride alone, or did you usually find a friend to ride with each day?
I started out alone usually. I was riding by myself, but because I had the license plate on the back, people would either they would ride by me and they would call out my name and they would just say hi. And because it said New York on it, people occasionally somebody would ride up to me and we would ride for a few hours and talk. So some people, you know, were interested in where I came from. Some people had lived in New York for a while, or they had a kid that lived there for, you know, at that point, and they knew something about the city. So I met a whole bunch of people, different people. I met one guy I knew at the time. I had a folding bike from Bike Friday, and I was in a Bike Friday Facebook group, and I ran into this one guy that I knew from that group, just at a rest stop. And I also on that ride, because I had obviously didn't bring my Bike Friday with me, but if I saw somebody on a Bike Friday and I saw about 10 people, I went up to them and rode for a while. And one woman, an older woman that I was riding with, she was riding with her granddaughter, and she had given her granddaughter a Bike Friday, and I saw her the granddaughter I saw the next day. I said, "Oh, I rode with your grandmother yesterday," and so we rode for a while. So I it was fun because it gave me a chance. Gave me a chance to ride at the speed that I like and to challenge myself. And then in between that, I would have a chance, an opportunity to socialize with people.
What kind?
At night when, I would get, sometimes I would get together with people to eat, but by the nighttime, usually, actually what happened, my regular thing that I did that year was I would come into the, I would come into the campsite, and they had a massage company that they contracted with, and I went over to the one masseuse that I had gotten to know, and every night I had a massage so that and all I did really was when I got there was I got something to eat. I had a massage, I got something to eat, and I went to bed.
You used your specialized bike, right? So what size tires did you have? 700 by what?
At that time, I think I had 25s on it.
Okay. So just a quick time check. We're at about 7:47.
Oh, let me get
Yep.
through here. So this is Davenport, where you got to dip your bike in the water, and we're done, pretty much finished. And this is the trip home, again from the airport.
That's your souvenir?
That's my souvenir. That's the patch they give you when they send it at the beginning. So pausing share, and how do I get out of here? Stop. How do I stop this?
What do you want to stop? Don't you want to just switch to another album?
Yeah, I do. How do I
I
go?
think you escape from inside your photos and you go. Something's wrong. You're clicking in the wrong space or something. It's
Well, I'm
beeping.
clicking escape, but I must be able to. Yeah, escape should get me out of full screen.
Yeah, but it thinks you're in a different mode.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why it's doing that.
Oh, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Okay. New share. Oh, I don't need to do that.
Just double click on the first one you want to start with.
Yeah. So this is North Carolina mountains to coast. I did RAGBRAI, and then I wanted to do something else. I didn't want to do RAGBRAI again. Some people keep doing RAGBRAI. And so I looked around to see what other thing might be really interesting to do. And I have two friends who live in North Carolina. So I looked up what was available in North Carolina, and there was this thing going across from Blowing Rock to Atlanta Beach. And I, I got in touch with them, said, I'm coming down. Let's get together.
So Jacqueline, they don't want to let you get off of RAGBRAI quite yet.
Okay.
We've had a bit of a flurry of questions. So let me say that you did talk about how you got the bike there, Ken. So if you watch this on recording, you can see it there. What was that body of water that you stepped into? Was it Lake Denton, did you say?
Atlantic Beach. Sorry.
No. Back in RAGBRAI. Just tell us.
What
was the body of water that you were holding your bike up next to? It was no, you don't have to go back to it. Just
it was that's okay.
If you don't remember, okay.
Davenport. It was in Davenport. It was on the east side of Iowa. It's a river.
Oh, was that the Mississippi River?
It's the Mississippi.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And then, there you go. Thanks, Maggie. And let's go back to where you were in the pic. Go back to setting up the next one. What was the best thing that you liked about doing RAGBRAI, and would you like to ever do it a second time?
Well, RAGBRAI was amazing. I think everybody should do it, and it's indescribable. I mean, you can look at those pictures that I took, and it's, you know, and it's a pretty state, but the experience was so incredible to be around that many people having a good time riding a bike all day long. I mean, it was just it's hard to really put into words the feeling of being a part of this event.
So you do it again?
I went by myself, and I wouldn't do it again by myself, because although I enjoy doing it by myself, and I did North Carolina mountains to coast by myself. I don't mind going by myself. I meet people. I mean, I can talk to a rock. And but some of the things that the there was really, it would have been nice to have somebody to meet up with at the end, you know, of the day. That really, you know, that really was the one thing that I missed. I didn't miss really that there wasn't anybody during the day, because I was involved with riding and I was meeting other people. But it was, you know, but it would, I wouldn't go by myself, just because I really only had one night where I got together with some people to eat dinner. And that, you know, that would have been, that would be the only way that I would do it again, is to have some other people that
Is
were
there, is there,
interested,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
in being independent, but wanted to be connected.
So if you did do it again, is there anything else you would do differently besides, it sounds like, maybe go with a friend?
Well,
Anything
I
else?
wouldn't take that. I wouldn't take that tent again. I don't even have that tent anymore. I gave it away. I have a better tent. That was one thing. I'm I didn't mind camping every night. That, you know, that didn't bother me. I had the right gear for sleeping correctly. You know, well, or as well as I could, given the situation I was in. So, but you know, but I certainly made a mistake with the pup tent.
So people want to get you on to North Carolina, but I'll say that Debbie shared that it's called the Mardi Gras on Wheels. I don't know if you heard them refer to it that way. And one last question is, was there any organized uh, dining at all for you to meet up with others and dine together? Nothing like that?
Well, a couple of nights we were one night we were in a camp that was a golf course, and there wasn't really anything to go to, so there was a restaurant there, and I went there and I sat with a whole bunch of people that were eating there, and that was nice. But the rest of the nights there was, you know, and then there were a couple of nights actually with the charter, and they had a dinner, like about 3 nights they had a dinner, which was nice. Oh, I wanted to say too, they had a laundry service, which was really nice. Tuesday night, that, you know, you came in and gave them a pile of dirty laundry, and they gave you a bag, and they took it, and the next day, on Wednesday, when you picked up your luggage, you also picked up your laundry bag. And so you only, you know, you didn't have to bring like a whole week's worth of clothing. So you could take, you know, you could take all the stuff that you had and recycle it. They didn't have that at North Carolina, so that was, you know, that was a little bit. I suggested it, and they said, "Oh, they never thought of that." But that was, you know, that was one of the best things that they could have done, in my opinion, was have that service. I mean, you paid for it, but I signed up for it. Oh, and and there were mobile. So camping, there were mobile showers, and you know, you paid like $5 for the shower and for a couple of towels, and you know, so every night, and that was kind of one of those you were on a line kind of things too. And those were pretty nice, actually. They, I mean, you had enough hot water and you were clean when you finished. So
Okay, so North Carolina now. Let's go.
all right, so North Carolina. So I signed up for North Carolina the next year because of, because I had a touchstone. I started with, I have two friends, and one friend decided she was going to meet me at the end, and actually we spent like 3 days uh, driving up the coast, and we ended up back in Raleigh, and so that so I could meet. We had lunch with my other friend in Raleigh, and then I flew home. But so I flew into Raleigh, and then we were bused to Blowing Rock, and this is the route every day. Blowing Rock to Hickory, Hickory to wherever it was. I think I have it anyway. You can see where Raleigh was. It just was a point, because there's a bike store. You shipped in this case, you shipped your bike to Raleigh and to this bike store, and they took your bike to Blowing Rock, and then they picked it up in Atlantic Beach and shipped it back to the bike store that back in New York. This was a much nicer experience for me. The bike store knew what they were doing, and they put the thing together, and they had a couple of services available to tune your bike up at the end, and so that you would be in good shape when you went home. And they were the same mechanic that was at every stop in the evening. So if you had a problem, you could go in and talk to them, and they would take care of it. And I had flats and that kind of stuff. So I was really happy that there was somebody that kind of was familiar with the bike, that on a consistent basis. This ride had about 800 people. They thought it was huge. But if you've done RAGBRAI, nothing is ever huge again. Well, except for the 5-borough bike tour, which is twice as big as that, actually. So, and this was slightly hillier, about the same, a little bit longer. It would have been even longer, except we had a heat wave for 2 days, where the temperature was essentially about 99 and felt like 110. And one day I got heat exhaustion, and had to take the SAG back to the next stop. And the next day was supposed to be, I was planning on the Century for that day, but it just was too hot. And after having heat exhaustion the day before, I didn't think it was a smart idea. So I did 80 miles instead of the extra 100, and a bunch of people did that as well. So this is a little misleading, because Blowing Rock to Hickory, it says the elevation is 3,000 miles, but what it doesn't tell you is that the first mile was downhill, all the way downhill, and it was about a mile downhill, 5,000 feet of descending, which was amazing. Let's see, where's my little, this was their jersey, which I promptly lost or left in a motel. So this ride, I combined camping and staying in a hotel. I camped for 2 days, and then I stayed in a hotel. I camped for 1 day and stayed in a hotel. And it was, although I liked camping the whole of RAGBRAI, I was sort of tired of it. I got a better tent, but I decided that I would do a combination. So coming into Raleigh, which they were on the beginning of their heat wave, and so I brought my suit. This was getting ready to go from Raleigh to Blowing Rock. We were all getting our various, our bikes and our stuff on the bus, and getting our information that we needed. That day, this is what the temperatures were, and no idea that it was going to be so incredibly hot for 2 days. And they actually said that during the time that, so this is where we put our, this is where people that hadn't had their bikes shipped directly to Blowing Rock put their bikes. And this was on the bus. We had been sitting on the bus for like hours, and I took a little run at the break. So we came into Blowing Rock, which is a well-known, which is a well-known resort for people camping and other stuff that they come to. So this is kind of a little overview of the ride.
Should have been home yesterday. Country road. And still the man all say, y'all come. Yes, you all come. See us when you can. Y'all come. Yes, you all come. See us down there.
This is one of the first rest stops. This is a commuting, people commute to this town from the morning.
Where do you get your music?
YouTube.
What, do they do it randomly or you pick it? The
What?
music?
No, I download, they have free music that you don't even have to attribute.
Right. You did have a question. It was in October what month?
This
was
was the first weekend, the last weekend in September, first weekend in October, which was supposed to be really pleasant weather. It was actually, for the most part, it was. Whoops. It was, I guess, about the 27th to the 4th of October, 27th of September.
Can you explain this route design? It looks a bit like out of the way.
This is Blowing Rock to Hickory. I didn't have the, for some reason, I don't have the Strava for it. But what it shows you is 5,400 feet. This was the first mile downhill. It was amazing. And although a bunch of us that were going down said we really felt sorry for anybody that was a beginner. But it was a mile of downhill on a highway, no lights, and no traffic. And the thing about this ride, you saw those empty roads. This was a rural trip. It was it was all back roads. The advantage was that there really was no traffic, hardly any cars. I mean, and because it was 800 people, we spread out. I could go for hours and not see anybody, which was RAGBRAI there. That was not going to happen. And a couple of days later, show you, I actually, the queue, the road queue was not good, and I missed a turn, and I did about 20 miles off route, and I had to come back. That was the first day of the heat wave, which is why I ended up taking the SAG truck back to town, because the 20 miles of out of the way I did were the 20 miles I was going to do to get to the end of the route. So this is the route the first day, and it just followed it. I don't know that, people design the route every year and they do it different. But it was
Maybe someone in Ferguson, one of the businesses, paid them a lot of money to come out that way.
I don't know.
Kidding. All right. Oh,
What?
Sorry. I think someone's just making a statement. Keep
okay.
going.
So this was, as we came out of the camp, this was the, I stopped to take a picture of the way, what it looked like. And we were, going into a bunch of different roads coming into, actually, take that back. That wasn't the first day. This was coming into Blowing Rock on the bus. And then after I set up, this was my tent this year. And I didn't have a chance to set it up before I left. So some guy was really nice and helped me. He read the instructions so I could put it up. It takes, again, these things put themselves up. They just pop, you put the sticks in two directions, and then the whole thing pops up and becomes a tent. So it's pretty fast, and it was pretty comfortable. I could sit up in it and put all my luggage in it. And then everybody left it. This also, nobody locks their bike. I covered it. Some people had big enough tents that they could put the bike in with them. And those of us that didn't, just covered them up. I had a plastic bag that I carried around with me and wrapped up every night. So this was around town in Blowing Rock. It was really pretty. In the town of Blowing Rock, there was this little building that you could write a prayer and hang it up. It was kind of moving, actually. And Orion was there. So this is not a black, there's the belt and the four things. I took a picture in the middle of the night, and then spent a whole bunch of time enhancing it so you could see it. So this is the overlook from the beginning of the ride. We took off here, this is where we were going down. At this point I met some guy I knew from the 50 and over Facebook group. The next day we rode together for a couple of hours, which was fun. This was so beautiful. And then the inevitable rest stop that you came to. And again, like I say, this was pretty much the view. There, everyone's at the rest stops. You would run into people, but in between, it was you were kind of on your own. And then at the end of the day, you came back to the campsite. So this ride, I they provided the camp sites, and they provided they had a meal plan, which I signed up for because I figured at least I would always have breakfast and lunch and dinner available, or breakfast and dinner available. And if I wanted it, it was like $200, so it wasn't a big deal not to eat it if I didn't want to. Unfortunately, it was not a big deal because it was the worst food that I ever had, and I lost about 5 pounds on this ride because not only was the food on the food plan terrible, there was no lunch. And because it was a rural route, there was no place to go to get lunch except for one day. There happened to be a restaurant on the side that everybody stopped in. So the first 2 days I existed on peanut butter, and then I couldn't deal with peanut butter anymore. When I went to, then at least I was at the when I was at the hotels in the morning, they had breakfast, and a couple of places had hard-boiled eggs, and so I started taking like 3 or 4 hard-boiled eggs with me, so I had some protein to eat during the day. So we came into the second day at the town, and the whole town came out and gave us a greeting, which was nice. This was a little public library that had been established by a doctor who moved into this town. I don't actually, let me see. I don't remember where it is, but anyway, people donated books to them. They had quite a few books. It was kind of nice. It had been around for like 100 years or something. And at this town, there was we were in Spencer, right? We went to the Transportation Museum, which was fascinating. It was, they had all these old cars, trains, and a whole bunch of miniatures, which was pretty amazing. And back on the road without anybody around. This was Hickory to Salisbury, about the 3rd day. This ride got progressively flatter as we went from mountains to coast. Obviously, it got to be like one day there was like about 600 feet of climbing, kind of like Brooklyn. So this interesting sign sounds very optimistic, but the trucks and the cars ignored it. So this was the restaurant, the one restaurant we ever passed on the entire week. They had great food, I think. I don't know, we were all hungry. This was the stop. This stop was kind of the last stop in the afternoon. It was really hot, and I had this ice, and then I went to the bathroom and I took my helmet off and I left it there. And I didn't realize it until I was about 5 miles out. I didn't want to go back, and so I called the SAG truck, and they sent somebody into the bathroom and brought it to me, which was pretty nice of them. I took this picture because, see this spoon, this guy used spoons as his tent stakes. I thought that was a really unique way to put his tent up. And then one morning we were taking out this. I asked the cops if I could take a picture with them. They were there every morning to make sure that the cars stopped when we were coming out from the campsite to go onto the highway, which is, you know, a really complicated kind of maneuver for them. And a couple of the churches had breakfast. This was a pancake breakfast that was put up. This was the SAG truck I had to take back a bunch of us on the first hot day. Now, this was the route that I took. I was supposed to ride up to about 20 miles farther. Well, you see that little loop up there, up in the middle. At this point, there was supposed to be a cue that said go this direction, and I didn't see it. And so I was riding. And it suddenly occurred to me that I didn't see anything, and I didn't have my my alert set put on my Garmin, so I didn't know I was off course. So at a circle up here at the top, I thought I better check, and so I looked, and I was 10 miles off route.
Yeah,
So
you know, in the abstract, the map looks like you jumping for joy when you discovered that.
Yeah. Woohoo! So I rode back, and I went to the rest stop. I went to the next rest stop, which was here, and I said I need a ride back to camp. I think this, yeah.
So you're at about 8:17, just to remind you. You think you have like 10 minutes or more left?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
If there are any more questions, get them in now. And what we'll do is when you finish, Jacqueline, we'll open up for everyone to give you a round of applause. That's my latest closing approach.
Yeah. So this started to be, pretty flat going into Greenville, and then leaving Greenville, it was even flatter, and it got to be, it was actually pretty boring because no hills meant that you were pedaling the entire 70, 80 miles that you were going. There was no just, letting the bike do its work. It was all you. And there was a lot of cotton. We went over this bridge to get into this town. And it rained in this place, and it flooded. I was not staying at a campsite here. I was staying at a hotel. But they had to move all the tents so that people could sleep.
How far apart were the rest stops, and what was the average distance each day that you did?
Well, it was 450 miles, so about anywhere between 60 and 80 miles a day.
And lots of rest stops?
The rest stops were about, rest stops, I guess, were about 20 miles apart. There'd be like 3 in a day or 4, depending. So this was a 60 miles. So there probably were like 3 rest stops on this one, or two, I guess, and then you were at the end. And you can see it's starting to go, it's going, it's not very, there's not a lot of variation. It just, you just go, so it's not 600 feet of elevation up and down. So it's really, you're just going flat. This is what that video was showing. These boats, these people came in from upstream, and they came into town they commuted by boat. Individual boats, not a ferry. Yeah, this is, so these pictures are like, these are fascinating, but they're kind of, you had to be there pictures that, were fascinating. This is somebody's tricycle loaded down. They were packing all their stuff every day.
For a second, I was going to say it looked like a recumbent, but it's not. It's clearly a tricycle. Wow.
Yeah.
That's funny.
And then the last day there was a headwind from about midway to the end that we had. So although it was not much climbing, it was excruciating. It was a hot headwind that we had coming all the way from the mainland and across the this little.
Did you feel, were you helped by the fact that this was more in the end of the season and you had been riding all season long, so you were in good shape?
Well, this year, before this trip, I rode all winter that following year. I didn't train in particular, but because of RAGBRAI, I already had a habit of doing Saturday, Sunday rides, and I was also doing a Wednesday ride every week. So I mean, that was last year, 2019. I did 5,000 miles for the year. I ended up with, and so I rode all winter. By that year, I had been accumulating cold weather gear for a couple of years, and then I already was riding the 2 days a week from the previous year, and I kept that up all, pretty much all winter. So I, didn't do anything, and I did my regular route to around Central Park. That was kind of a routine for me on Wednesdays. So it wasn't like I did anything new that year. I just never stopped. That's my friend Gwyn that met me at the end. So I was sending her texts with where I was when I got in. And then she took pictures of me, or took the video of me as I came in. So that's it.
Well, thank you very much. There are no more questions at this time. So I'm going to unmute everyone and give everyone, please give a big hand. Do you want to stop sharing? Yeah, you'll see everybody. Whoops, where did it go?
Thank you, Jacqueline. Thank you so much.
Really enjoyed.
I hope you enjoyed it.
Really cool.
I love both of these.
Felt you were there.
Bravo.
This year I had registered for the ride across the Erie Canal, which just got canceled, and then I have pre-registered for a ride in Colorado in September. I'm hoping that doesn't get canceled.
Good luck. So everyone, just to remind you, next week we're going to have Monica Gohl and Donald Burke talking about their trip to Argentina and Chile, which should be very cool. And then we just added, in addition to the mechanical class this coming week, which will feature retaping handlebars, next week on Wednesday, Jim Zisfine is going to bring the thing he offers during his first aid class that he teaches to leaders in the club. We're going to teach it to everyone. So if you're riding on your own or in small groups, if anything happens, you all have some basic skills. And he has a very interesting perspective on riding during Corona. Sorry for all the noise. Thank you for attending, and see you next time.
Bye. Thank you very much. It was really great.
Thank you, everyone.